This week on the AI in Sales podcast, I speak with Basil Fateen, CEO of HireHunt, an interactive recruitment platform that allows applicants to connect with jobs by showing who they are and what they can do far beyond what a simple resume can transmit. In this podcast, Basil talks a little bit about what's wrong with today's traditional recruitment process and the inherent biases involved in hiring an applicant that can hinder a company in making a good decision. More importantly, Basil describes how HireHunt is using machine learning to create a different type of job matchmaking experience that fits today's real-world demands. Now, we discuss how their platform uses text messages or email interactions, for example, to qualify a candidate and what the system looks for. All this and a gamification assessment example that quite literally was something I never would have thought of. With that said, let's jump into it. So Basil, here's the first question. What's wrong with the traditional recruitment process as we know it today?
Well, everything really. I mean, it was pretty okay maybe 60 or 70 years ago, but the process itself hasn't really changed to match how different the world is, how different people's mindsets are, and just how many people and opportunities there are. So it's still very traditionally based on job descriptions and CVs, and that causes massive bottlenecks and friction points, and really annoys everyone, annoys applicants, it annoys employers. And when I was initially looking at the issue, I was actually quite fascinated by how there could be such huge discrepancies in the job market where there's so many people looking for work and so many companies looking for people, and that just didn't make any sense. So when I drilled down into the process, I realized that that's what it is, and that's why I didn't want to do a better version of a job board. I wanted to do a completely different process.
So let's go into that. Let's talk about HireHunt, your platform. Let's talk about, maybe you can lift up the hood so we can look at the engine. Tell us what's in that engine.
So there's quite a few actually elements in that engine. Recruitment's kind of a massive problem composed of a lot of little sub-problems. Some of the things I've used is artificial intelligence in terms of trying to understand how much is someone matching a certain position based on everything we know about them. And then comes the second part of it that's kind of supports it is how can I make every interaction of an applicant or every interaction of an employer allow the platform to get smarter and know more about them, and based on maybe a way they answer a certain question, or based on the way they select a certain interview. And what it is, it's how we could do this is that it becomes a guided process. So it's not just based on a text job description that an employer writes and a text CV that someone sends. It kind of moves maybe 80% of the interview process online. So you're actually going into an interview by setting up your profile and applying to jobs. You're answering questions, you're playing these little gamified assessments, you're doing certain things and choosing certain paths that keep personalizing the experience and telling more about you, about your strengths, your weaknesses, your personality, your vision ahead, and starts to give you more feedback about yourself as an applicant and matching you with opportunities. And for employers, it gives them a super accurate portrayal of who these people are and what they can do beyond the CV, because at the end of the day, the CV just says what you've done. And for the first few years of your career, that's pretty irrelevant because you still haven't done anything, especially if you're a fresh grad, especially if you're still experimenting. So to be able to really accurately see that someone's potential and character and match to the job very quickly and online and in a fun experience, that was the idea of HireHunt.
So I mean, this is really fascinating to me, which is why I wanted you on this podcast. I'm super excited about this interview.
I really appreciate that, by the way, and thank you for inviting me.
No, you're welcome. And so, a little. Can you go a little deeper, because this is really fascinating? Because the whole thing about taking the interview online and maybe even a little further down the hiring line, through interactions and what people say or how they respond, give me a little more of that. Like, give me maybe a real case study or a real example of somebody that, that based on what they said, how they said it, maybe they got the job or maybe they didn't get the job.
Well, I mean, the most direct example is actually the HireHunt team right now. Every single one of the people I hired through HireHunt, which is quite a meta kind of experience and quite weird that when I look around the office, I can remember every single answer someone said that made me hire them. And that's what really like proved the concept to me very early on, even before lots of companies started to understand how much that helps them, is that really when you ask someone a certain question, like people are very expectant, the cliche questions that they get in the interviews, the where do you see yourself in 5 years and stuff like that. And even like for the technical assessments, like the whiteboard test that they do technically and stuff, there's so many things that prepare you for that online, you know, and they kind of give you this cheat sheet of things to prepare. And even the whole CV process. I mean, people now, all the CVs are so tailor-made to bypass the ATSs and the keyword filtering. So it's all very manufactured and fake. So by making the process more like a message, like instant messaging online and question answers, and it's also public. So when you answer a question, it builds your profile. You're building your profile by the questions you're actually answering. It really, like at the beginning, it was just a way to automate the process. That was the idea. But then I realized that it really does show who this person is, and that's a big part of it. And then the AI starts to learn more from these answers and from these interactions.
Now, not to, I know you don't want to give me the cheat sheet to hold this, because that's kind of what you're trying to avoid, right? The whole, you know, the standard. But, you know, just give me one example, Basil, of, you know, hey, here's an answer that, you know, give me a question and then give me a good answer versus a bad answer.
I'd say that it really depends on the employer, and that's where like how it's special is that like two employers could look at the same CV and say, yeah, let's schedule an interview with this person. But then two employers on HireHunt would look at the answer from that person's CV, and one person says this guy is our guy, and the other person says there's no way we'd ever hire him. Mm-hmm. So that's it really depends on the employer, and that's why it makes the process much faster, because by seeing someone's answers and then asking them extra things online and seeing the different insights that have been generated through them, it saves you a lot of really bad interviews, and there's really nothing worse than bad interviews. It's like a bad date. It's nobody has a good time.
No, I get that. And so I also love the fact that you used your own application to hire your own people.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this interview is that. And so again, give me one example of an answer you got from one of your employees that said, you know, hey, this person is really worth looking at. Like, what was the question and what was their answer that really made them stand out?
I think there was one question that made me hire my senior salesperson right now. And the question wasn't even directed at being sales, and he did not have a sales background. But the question was, what do you imagine, what's been one rush or a thrill in your life? And that was a very open question, right? And this guy was just a fresh graduate, and his answer was, during an internship I had, it was the rush of a big sale. There's really nothing like that, of putting in the work over time and then having that sale go through. That rush is unlike anything else, and that just made me really excited to meet him. And he's really a big part of our sales process right now. And he was a kid at the time, but the way he talked about the thrill of the sale, as opposed to the technicalities of making a sale or something like that, or as opposed to anything else in life, that he really, this answer made me understand that this person's not just going to come to work and do the job. He loves this.
And so is there a, like, you know, in the AI that you use, is there, like, you know, when we talk about emotional analysis and sentiment analysis, is that part of it?
Yes, absolutely. Linguistic analysis. The linguistic analysis in combination with the personality assessments, in combination with actually seeing their answers, gives a very accurate portrayal of who this person is. And what they chose to answer, or the games they chose to play versus other games, also gives us insights.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. You talked about gamified assessments.
Yes.
Give me an example of that.
So one of the things is, like, you know, there's a lot of common stuff that employers test that are not necessarily technical skills, right? So it's easy to test technical skills using MCQs and things like that, whether it's programming languages or like knowing a certain like tool or something. But if you're trying to test someone's level of comprehension, for example, or how well they can do some research, so one of the things we built in is very general kinds of gamified assessments to be able to test these general skills. So, for example, one of the gamified assessments is it gives them a random fact from a random web page, and then it doesn't tell them what the web page is, and then it times them how quickly they can go and figure out how to reach this information online.
Interesting.
Reaching information online is become a part of every single job. So seeing how quickly someone can understand the question, understand where to find it, and reach the answer and come back and write the answer and unlock the points, plus they get bonus points for speed. This is like an example of that.
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, when we were starting, we didn't want to do one thing and say this is how to hire. We wanted this platform to be like this completely customizable recruitment power tool mothership, like that every company can do their own perfect screening process. And then when we worked on the screening for a long time with these things and made it customizable and then made the user experience really easy to build their own process, then we started to get into the sourcing, because a lot of like the startups and SMEs had problems reaching people, and we didn't want to be just like a job board where we just gather CVs and give them access. So then we took our concept of the AI and then we started to move them into the sourcing direction. So now you could launch these really powerful AI-powered sourcing campaigns that go off on social media and start to chat with people and then give you insights based on them and and how much they're matching the job, and then you can talk to them.
Now, is part of your program there at HireHunt, and you just touched on it, so I'm curious how far you've gone this way. When you look at having those interactions, right? Are you guys there yet where you can actually have, I guess I'll just, for lack of a better word, phrase, your virtual assistant actually go have some conversations and then come back and store those results?
Not entirely. Like, to be honest with you, I mean, the anyone who'd say that like the AI is there 100% would be lying. AI at this point, in terms of completely fooling anyone that this is a human chat, really, it's not there yet, or at least the technology is not there publicly available. But this is definitely something that's happening in the near future, but it definitely automates a massive amount of the process.
Gotcha.
And then it allows you to jump in and take it from there, like it automates a big part of it. And then as you're monitoring the answer, someone might give an answer that you're like, okay, tag me in now. And then you start to talk to them and then schedule an interview.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's what I meant, because I'm with you on that. When we talk about AI, and I guess it's worth clarifying that, many of these applications are very narrow AI.
Yeah.
In other words, very specific to answer certain problems, to resolve a certain issue. General AI, when you can actually map domain expertise, we're still years away from that. Yeah. So the fact that you can actually, I'll say, click over to when you're ready to jump in is what I was asking.
Exactly. And I'll add something to that. So we have the initial AI that's kind of like more of the classifying AI for the understanding the personality and the matches and stuff like that. But then we have AI that on the fly trains the system. So when you do tag it in, it starts to try to understand how you're answering questions, and then it gets smarter. Definitely, for it to become completely like a human person, we need like hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of more interactions. But that's the process that we've set in motion. No,
I'm with you on that. And, one of the things I want to ask you, I want to start wrapping this up. And I could talk to you for an hour or two, I got a feeling. But how can AI defeat the hiring bias? And before you answer, in my book, the Sales Ex Machina book, I had a Harvard Business Review study that shows that AI applications such as HireHunt are 25% more accurate. Mm-hmm. And that also, and I think Angela Duckworth, who wrote a book called Grit, also said the following, that IQ and even experience are not predictors of success. Yeah. Based on that, talk to me about the hiring process and, about IQ, past experience being a predictor of success.
Yeah. So this is actually something I've been studying, just like in terms of dealing with the companies and seeing how they hire, especially in the early days when I didn't really know that much about recruitment. I was just seeing and learning, is that so many companies have these innate biases that they're not even aware of. So some companies, for example, really just want to hire one kind of a person. So someone like them. This is even though companies should have an overall culture, but this is pretty detrimental to the company to have the same character in every single position. You usually want a good diversity of characters, and it's been proven that a healthy amount of diversity is really the difference between a very strong culture and company and one that is just very one-dimensional. And other companies might have biases that exclude people, especially for example, of certain universities, or if they didn't study very specific fields, or if they don't have the exact year. Some people have biases of the years of experience. Like they'll say, I'm not even going to consider someone who has less than 3 years experience. Mm-hmm. And there might be someone with just like a year over or something, but they're a genius and they could come and hit the ground running within 2 weeks. And I've seen so many companies shoot themselves in the foot because they're very stubborn about they having a certain bias. So what the platform does is that what we started to do at the beginning when we didn't have the AI is we tried to advise against this, but then obviously they got very defensive, like you're not going to tell us how to hire. So what we started to do is we had the AI kind of bypass their bias with the user experience of telling them, hey, you know, this person's actually matching very, very strongly because 1, 2, 3, 4. So they don't see the CV first and have the bias. They already get something telling them they're matching and it telling them why they're matching. So then when they go look at their CV as more of like a bureaucratic tool, they can't change their opinion. They're already impressed.
Yeah, that's the rule of consistency, right? Once you say this is what I'm looking for, you know, and as you say, once they agree that the machine says, here's what you're looking for, this is a good match. What you're saying is then they can't go to the resume and go, oh, I changed my mind. They won't do that typically.
Exactly. But if they had started at the resume, definitely most of the time there would be a bias to exclude someone great.
I think so. I love that. So in your process, you typically try to get, we'll call it the upfront commitments or public declarations of what they're looking for first.
Yes, exactly. And that's actually even part of our onboarding process is for them to try the matching, so that you can trust it and see it in action, so that when I tell you later on an actual applicant how much they're matching, you have that trust in place.
You know, based on the data you see, and we'll end on this question, Basil, based on some of the, just some of the hirings you've seen in the past, through your AI, what have been some either cool, surprising things that you've seen that maybe, you wouldn't have seen as a human, if I can say it that way?
Oh, yeah, that's a really, really good question.
I'll clarify that a little bit. Like, well, maybe, a company came to you looking for X, but when you showed them ABC, they were like, this actually is better than what we were looking for. Things of that nature.
Yeah, there was actually a case. It was a technical case, maybe 3 or 4 months back, where actually not only did the company have a specific kind of a bias, but I also had a bias. And then the AI put someone as a strong match, and even I felt at the time, oh man, like there's a massive bug in the algorithm. There's I gotta get back into the code. I gotta check why this is saying this, and then because there weren't they went through the other options and they still weren't satisfied. They're like, all right, we're gonna say this guy is obviously not it, but let's just see. And that person ended up getting hired and was fantastic. And the thing with AI is that you can't always tell why it said so. And that's one of the issues is that sometimes it's not very clear. Like you really have to do a lot of work and backtrack why it gave this result, because it's supposed to be learning all the time, So that was actually a case of digging back into this person's interactions with the platform and seeing a certain path of interactions, and then understanding, oh yeah, that actually makes sense based on those specific interactions, even though their overall profile, like their CV, didn't make sense. But yeah, that's how it worked out.
Oh, that's a great story. That's a great story. I love that.
When that happens, it's a little bit eerie.
Yeah, I know what you mean though. It's one of those, hey, what's it doing? Because I don't understand it. But again, it's thinking outside the box, if we can use that analogy. Yeah. So Basil, any final words on your company or hiring in general?
Basically, our goal is within the next few years to become really the global standard of recruitment, especially for people in the first 10, 15 years of their career. It's fast, it's fun, it's accurate, and it's just the way it has to go.
Yeah, I love the fact that I think your underlying mission, what your mission is, whether you acknowledge it or not, is that your mission is really to remove cognitive bias from the decision-making process, and I think that's fantastic.
We believe that when the right people find each other quickly, things are going to be insane. That this is what we believe. We're working not just to get this technical success or financial success, but actually to see what's the result of that. What happens when the right professionals find each other really fast? What do they make with each other? You know what I mean?
I love it. The matchmaker. Basil, thank you for your time.
I really, really appreciate it, and I have to say, listening to your podcasts and your videos have drastically improved our sales process. So I want to thank you for that.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Basil.
Thank you so much.